the first thing I want to note is that all of the people that I've ever met, when I ask them, did you begin your life as intelligent and informed as you are now, all of them have said that they have learned during their lifetime. They began relatively naive and moved toward wisdom, in some cases with some challenges, some expectations that were not met. So an expectation developed, then something else happened that was not in accord with that expectation, and we could call that confusion. We could call that potentially complexity or even chaos, depending on how extreme the set of expectations is, and then the actual violation or the circumstances that are discontinuous with the expectations. So we move from naivety or ignorance or a blank slate, total curiosity, toward forming expectations, and then eventually toward refining those expectations, and that can be a challenging process. So we also talked about, before I started recording, we were mentioning being scared, feeling cheated, feeling betrayed. I don't know if we said all those words, but some of that. Wanting to keep certain experiences secret. So that's one I want to emphasize for a moment. If we experience fear, or if we experience a sense of insecurity, is it common for people sometimes to want to hide their experience of insecurity or a sense of vulnerability? Would that be, I'm going to actually ask for people to comment on that. Does everybody get that that's really common and really logical, that sometimes someone would be so scared or feel so vulnerable that they would want to keep that vulnerability secret from at least some other people? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, with the use of pretense, yes.
Okay, go on. Now we could jump into what are some of the different ways that people would hide a sense of insecurity. You mentioned pretense. Do you want to say a little more about that, or give a list of other methods?
Being shy would be one way, right? Being shy, being introverted, but certainly using the use of pretense. If we're not being sincere or being true to ourselves, we can certainly hide, our sincere nature by using pretense, right?
Mm-hmm. Like arrogance.
Yes.
Or know-it-all, or
Yes.
condescending. Yeah.
So if someone's displaying arrogance, is that a sign of insecurity, total security, panic, or what? Well, it's actually not really a panic, but it's you could say like it's a kind of a tantrum. And once someone starts into the path of arrogance, it's generally unlikely that they're going to, on their own, calm down and back off. Either the interaction just kind of dwindles off by itself, or else their arrogance kind of rides and gets more and more extreme until they interact with two different people, have a confrontation of contrasting arrogance, and then the conversation moves into repulsion and a fist fight, or throwing pies at each other, or sending fuck you text messages or whatever. Pardon my was that French? I think that was French. I don't speak French, so I don't know. Anyway, but we encounter as humans, typically as adults, I meant to say, in our childhood as children, we will encounter an experience of insecurity in which we'll be interested in keeping that secret from some people, or even everyone. Or it could be one particular person, it could be lots of people, it could be everybody except for those few safe people, or it could be literally, I want to actually block my own experience completely. I want to block my display of vulnerability. I don't even want to be aware of my own vulnerability, because if I'm aware of it, then I'm going to be nervous that somebody will see through my pretense, so I can actually get to a point of, a more frozen or traumatized state in which I might say something like, people should not be vulnerable, or people should not experience fear. Fear is just a false evidence appearing real, and FEAR, and fear has no functionality, and fear is the evil, devil, wrong, problem, and what we should do is always be hopeful no matter what. That kind of a layer can have enthusiasm and optimism and passion and we might say sincerity, but it's an indication of a background of fear. So the idea of we shouldn't have fear or people shouldn't experience fear is people shouldn't experience blank. And if I say, well, people shouldn't experience blank, that is a statement of what? You could say it could be a statement of fear. People shouldn't experience blank because I'm afraid of it. Why? Because I'm afraid of it. That's why they shouldn't experience it. I shouldn't experience it. They shouldn't experience it. I don't want my kids being afraid. I don't want my spouse showing fear. I don't want my peer group showing fear, because if they show fear, I might start getting concerned myself, which I could take this into talking about markets and economic herding, but the herding with the D, HERDING, but the idea that it is spiritually dangerous to display fear or to experience fear is actually a really remarkable, odd idea. So I've talked for a little while. Who would like to make a comment on anything I've said or what they think of they want to add that I didn't say?
I agree. Fear is a totally harmful, useless, and harmful energy, emotion.
Okay, so you're saying fear is always harmful?
Well, fear. I would say fear is like is like what this entire world, our existence almost is based. Everything so much of what we see, you can really trace it back to fear. I mean, even desire, want, and need is a fear. The desire for something is the fear of not having it. Or losing it. The want is the fear. Fear is a need. It's a fear. And so fears, we can categorize almost everything, emotions and feelings, I would say, without going into too much detail about it, as coming of fear.
Okay, so there's a group of emotions that are in the fear family. I generally will say that there are attractive emotions and repulsive emotions, and fear typically would be like withdrawing, like running away, retreating, fleeing. But related to fleeing is fighting, like enrage, as well as freezing, like in paralysis, or also pretending or faking can be done as a way of distracting some perceived threat. So playing dead like a gopher or possum or whatever creature that is, that's so that the particular organism isn't targeted by prey. That's why that works, why that some creatures have that capacity. That's my understanding. So we can talk about attractive emotions, like if someone displays joy, typically people will be drawn to that. It's kind of a radiant, appealing or attractive emotion. So joy, gratitude, hope. There's a set of emotions that we can characterize as attractive and a set of emotions we can characterize as repulsive. As far as fear always being harmful, I think that's what Thomas said a few minutes ago.
Yeah, explanations for it, why we need to fear, but there's a few I would probably agree with. But yes, I would say that.
Okay.
Fear is harmful.
So fear can be quite harmful. We could even go with the idea that fear is always harmful. I would say fear is always about harm. So there's always a concern for a loss or for a hurt or pain or harm. So something related to harm for sure. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on any of those immediate details, but feel free to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, no, thanks.
Well, I was just going to say that, clearly, if we're talking about fear in the sense of immediate physical danger, obviously it can be very useful. But if we're talking about fear based around social interaction or communication, it probably, is harmful, usually, because it does lead to confrontational dialogue. Some of the emotion we'll put into the words we use, our expression, it can be harmful. So fear in communication, for communication purposes, it can be pretty harmful.
So okay, Shelly, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the sense of if you're communicating with somebody that does induce fear in you, though, that might be helpful. If you are feeling sort of fearful or afraid, but I guess that would, I don't know if that would mean physical danger necessarily, which is what you were just saying, Daniel, but I think that sometimes if you're aware that, okay, this person is somebody I don't really want to communicate with for, X number of reasons, so I think I'm going to bow out of this conversation and, close it off right now and just sort of go on my merry way. So even in communicating, I think fear may be beneficial. It can be constricting. I see what you're saying, though, in a general sense. It can be constricting and restricting for us, but I also think that sometimes it can be helpful in pinpointing conversations or people we want to interact with.
I wanna comment on fear as it relates to some stress hormones. So, if I'm in a canyon, where I can go left or right, but I can't go up the walls of the canyon. So I've got like 2 possible paths, and that's it. And there's 40 tarantulas on one side and 60 tarantulas on the other side, and they're all coming at me. Is it appropriate for me to have cortisol or adrenaline spike? Those hormones? It certainly could be. Maybe, 40 tarantulas. Now think about this. I didn't plan this example out. But if there are 40 tarantulas coming at me from one direction, and I have a little room, I should be able to run a little bit and leap up into the air and hop over that little cluster of 40. Don't you think? I don't know. Maybe. But adrenaline and cortisol, which we associate with stress and fear, they can actually allow my physiology to do things that it wouldn't otherwise. Another example that I think is intriguing is the little old lady who's 106 pounds, and she lifts up a vehicle like maybe just a Toyota Camry, not a huge vehicle like a Ford F-150 truck or anything, but she lifts up the end of a vehicle because there's a little kid, trapped underneath or something. And normally that 105 pound, 170-year-old person wouldn't be able to lift up the entire Ford F-150 with one finger. But because of the power of adrenaline and cortisol, only one finger, and bam, they lift it up really fast. And then the child comes out and is rescued, and we go, thank you, firefighters, because I love how firefighters get to use their stress hormones effectively. So Valerie just returned. Hello. I just made a pretty silly reference. I don't know if anybody wants to. I want to give people an opportunity to comment on what I just said, and then we'll kind of see if Valerie can get pulled back into the conversation momentum that we have already established. Who else wants to comment?
I would just comment with an example of how fear is so often transferred in words and experience from, for example, mother and father to child. take a child that starts running across the street, and the parent, the first reaction, yells at the child in fear, screams at the child in fear to stop. And in that sound is the frequency of fear that penetrates in that child, when that child is at an age where it's developing and absorbing things. And so we're using, instead of stopping, we don't have time to stop, unfortunately, and perhaps some people will say that it's the fear that saved the child. But instead, if one could train self, fathers and mothers could train self to do what requires to be done to save the child in the moment, but at the same time, stop, breathe for a moment, and explain without the fear energy directed in the words why it's so important to stop and look both ways. But instead, what generally happens is we instill fear into the children. It's a continuous thing that goes down the generational lines. Instead of actually using words of common sense, explanations, so that the child understands what he did wrong and why he needs to correct this action next time, we often use fear. And so what the mother or father experienced in that moment is then transferred to the child in the frequency, the tonality of the voice, the words and tonality. So we're taking our own fears and we're often transferring them unto others, which is, again, needless. There are better ways. We could be instead just using words properly, common sense, but we don't. As human beings, we often transfer our fears to children. Hence, children being afraid of that which their mother, father is afraid of, or was afraid of.
Well, the example of like crossing a busy street, I don't think is that big of an issue. Like, I think of something like an electrical outlet in the wall. So if there's a child who's approaching an electrical outlet, say a 2 or 3 year old, I just say stop, and they say why? Because there's a monster in the wall. That's close enough. And then I put a little plastic thing in there and move them away and distract them, and then we play, checkers or whatever. So the interruption of the sharp energy doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. I don't have to make it it certainly can be traumatizing. I don't need to give a logical explanation, but I could, hypothetically. I mean, actually, a monster in the wall, frankly, on a 2-year-old's world, that's a pretty accurate statement, really. So, anyway, that's a couple thoughts I had. Thomas, do you want to reply to that at all before we?
I understand that. Yeah. I understand that. Yeah, sure.
Who else wants to comment? Before I think if nobody else wants to comment, I hope somebody, or I welcome you to, then I'll maybe try and bridge over to invite Valerie to comment.
I think it's all good. It's to me, that's another way I would term it is reactivity and analytical. Like as we evolve from reactivity to analytical, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and when we say reactivity, I think of just reflex. Like. Go ahead, Thomas.
From reaction to response. I would say.
Right on.
So to respond, and the same thing with the spider and the fear scenario. The fear of the spiders is not necessary for one to consider that. Okay, I've got to consider what is the best action, and in a quantum moment, we are actually able to consider the best course to take in situations. Our mind generally tends to go into fear, But if you see our physical bodies, if we're there with it, how our physical bodies will actually respond without us even being aware of it, consciously aware of it, we see that often there is no fear involved in that quantum moment, that our physicals actually move for us when it's necessary to move. However, when we let our pre-designed predispositions get involved and our fears take over us, when we start considering other scenarios and really let the fear of the spiders, the fear of this, the fear of that just grow inside of us, I would say that actually stifles our ability to take directive action. And where the grandmother lifts the car, scientists really can't explain this, but what I would say that is hypothetically, theoretically, I would say that was an overload of fear shutting down the mind consciousness system and enabling the physical just to move, basically cutting out our preconceived limitations of ourselves as consciousness and doing what requires to be done. Just a hypothetical kind of theory off the top of my head there.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the comment on there. So, in looking at fear, I would say we look at our fears. We really just break them down, dissect them, examine them, and point by point face them and let them go. Basically, rewrite our programming. And this is carried in our DNA to an extent, but also our childhood upbringing. But DNA carries a lot of it, I would say. And so in putting those fears out in front of us on the computer or on paper and looking at it, putting ourselves, the design of ourselves, in front of us, and then deciding, making a decision. Is this who I want to be? How would I like to be the next time I encounter this kind of situation? And basically writing instructions for ourselves, I found is, wow, really cool, because once you write those instructions out and you look at them, they're in there. They go into almost like our DNA, I guess. And actually very interesting what Russian scientists have to say about that, but I won't go into that. DNA and syntactic, that won't go into that. But so that's what I would say with fear is the key I've been learning, seeing, is writing it out, writing who we are out, who we've been, and how we would like to be, the changes that we would like to be, and then just putting them into us, inputting them into us. That's my comment on fear.
Okay. I think to back up and kind of say where we started, how we got into fear, and pick up a couple things that Valerie wasn't around when we covered. Does anybody want to make a quick comment before I do a little kind of a review?
I was going to comment that, Thomas, it sounds, when I'm hearing you speak, it sounds like you're referencing the panic driven out of fear, like being more calm about fear rather than panicked about it. Even in the situation with the cars and the kids, the panic behind just like screaming, reacting, and saying, get out of the street or whatever to your child is more of a panic. You fear your child is maybe going to get hit, but when you panic about it and the anger comes or the frustration or whatever is what you react to. But the fear itself, I feel like you're more saying we should relax into the fear and not be so tangled up in it or panic about it, and that removes our ability to think logically. Is that what I'm hearing, or am I misinterpreting what you're saying?
I guess I would say that it's not so simple. I would say just relax into it. That would be great. We could just do that. I think we've got to more face ourselves from the perspective that there's a lot of fear, and just look at so many different points of ourselves, so many of the emotions that we experience, I would say ultimately come from a fear.
So you're saying it's unnecessary for us?
It's pre-programmed. I would say it's by pre-programmed design that we can change. Yeah. And we can change this. Our upbringing, our culture, our upbringing, our DNA within us went a lot towards us designing our personalities, who we are as personalities, plural, and the emotions we experience, I would say, could almost be categorized a starting point of fear if we just break it down, kind of like a tree, get it down to the very roots and the seed of fear. But it's oversimplifying things, obviously.
Okay, I catch what you're saying. There seems like we're a lot of our frustration and angst is pre-programmed in fear.
Yeah, I would say kind of like that, yes. Ultimately, I guess you could say it's the fear of death, not fear of death so much, but the fear of not existing. You could probably take it down to that level, which again oversimplifies things. I realize that. Please continue, everyone.
Well, we actually, I think we might have ended last week talking about the fear or being confronted with the simplicity of mortality, and not that we really talked about the fearing of dying a whole lot, but as far as this week and our process, just as a quick review, we started with the idea of talking about a spectrum of shyness to boldness, with courage as a potential topic of exploration. And I mentioned the idea that we start without information, so we start what I would call naive, and then we begin to form expectations, or we have expectations just delivered to us from other people, or we form our own expectations, whatever. And as time goes on, it is generally accepted that some expectations will be violated by our experience. And when we are in the mode of processing that contrast between our experience and our expectation, there are some complexities that can arise there. And that may have been, I'm not exactly sure how we got into, I talked about wanting to hide the experience of vulnerability and hide the experience of even, I don't know that I said a lot about this, but if my expectations have been violated, I might want to pretend or project to people that, no, I wasn't surprised by that. No, I know. Oh, no. I knew that was going to happen like that. I'm not surprised. No, I'm not upset about that. So that social concern, and as we've talked about fear, I'm hearing, my sense is that we might be talking about the kind of fear that leads to an argument. So not just fear in a general sense, but some of us are, we're naturally using, some of the same words, but a little bit differently. And one of the things we went over individually when Valerie wasn't on the phone, actually, I guess I didn't really talk about my history, but everybody else, all the four of the other folks, Vanessa, Thomas, Shelley, and Dan, mentioned their personal history as far as, maybe Thomas didn't get into detail, but we mentioned personal history a little bit in some cases about when we were outgoing as a child, and then when shyness became prominent for us, for those of us who expressed that. Yes, Valerie, you can post a photo here. For those of us who expressed that we identified ourselves as shy, or at some point did identify ourselves as shy. So I'll say myself real quick that I did develop shyness over time, where I became focused on one friend or a small group of friends that I would share with and hang out with. I had a lot of acquaintances that I was friendly with, but in a way that was not especially relaxed or even happy necessarily, just like, getting by, surviving. As far as how to post a photo, Valerie, you can probably drag and drop a photo. If it has a URL, just drag and drop the URL. So, Valerie, do you care to share anything about your own history as it relates to shyness or outgoing or extroversion, introversion, any of those kind of things?
I was always told I was shy by my mother, but I'm not shy. I'm very capable of communicating and relating.
Did you feel like your mother experienced you as shy, and other people did not, like that it was more of like her perspective, her experience, her interpretation?
I think it was just her way of, I don't know, it's maybe what people call kids who just, I think it's just ignorance.
Okay. I thought that what my mother, Allison, said to me at one point, why do you never communicate? Or why can't you communicate? Or something like one of those really like kind of odd questions. Like, how am I supposed to answer that if you're going to be such a, a bully to start the whole conversation? I don't know if you get that could be stated in a kind of a bullying way, but it wasn't, hey, honey, why can you not communicate? It wasn't like a curious, compassionate kind of statement. It was like,
No, it was like an invalidation.
an accusation or something. Yeah, with in the form of a question. What, Valerie?
It was an invalidation and not enough, and without an opportunity to redeem oneself.
It was like an opportunity to argue and an opportunity to defend myself, so that she could, layer on more derision, frankly. After a while, I learned not to respond much, and it was like this thing of, I ask you how your day was, and you're such a jerk. You don't even answer me. That's correct. And I would say that's correct, and that'd be about it. So, Valerie, you posted this thing here, and I haven't read it yet, but I wanted you to have the opportunity to introduce it now, or is that something you want us to read later, or did you want to read it out loud to us now, or what do you have in mind with sharing that?
I don't know. It just to have the courage to share it with you guys. I just sometimes I have these things that happen inside me, something that I just wanted to express, and.
Do you want our feedback as far as, do we want to have you talk about it right now? I mean, I think I'm open to that, and I wanted to give people an opportunity to carry any momentum that they want to pick up on, because that's like a big tangent or a big, new direction.
Yeah, if it's a tangent and it's inappropriate, I understand.
Well, I'm not sure. You know what it says more than anybody else, right?
Well, I was just going to tie it into being courageous to share.
Yeah, if you, okay, does anybody have a quick comment, and then we'll plan for Valerie to share, unless anybody has a quick comment first? Okay, go ahead.
Well, as you all know, Robin Williams passed away recently, and to read about him and such was somewhat disturbing and upsetting and sad and very, I don't know, it seems like a long time since being touched by a public death that touched so many people so deeply, it seems to me. And so I just, there were so many different comments in different viewpoints, and I guess I was thinking how I often think in a cosmic sort of way. And I wrote all my thoughts about different things and just made them very concise, and this is what I came up with. It looks like the screenshot is finally downloading. It looks like it took a little bit of time, but I spent, looks like it's not going to go.
Well, I can see the words. Maybe
it looks like it was sent to Daniel Frischler.
Oh, that's Dan. Yeah, he's one of the participants in the call right here.
Oh, okay.
But I can see the words. I don't see the actual
I also,
image.
I also, just so that you, because I spent a lot of time making the image, and the image, I changed it so it's it's my profile image now in Skype. So
In Skype,
if you
okay.
if you don't see it on the call, then anyway, so.
When we log off, we can see the image on your profile.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. Just these are my thoughts. Consciousness evolves. Wise men and women expand ability. Joy is available. Judgment confused by mind defends self-righteousness and creates conflict. That was kind of what I was talking about earlier. Aware, we notice that the journey of our lives is an opportunity. Opening to that flow touches the hearts of men, women, the earth, the universe. Each a unique individual flower, some just in bud, some in full bloom. Some burst quickly with vibrant, spectacular displays and quickly inspire. Some open partially wither and die. Death slowly grabs hold. At every opportunity, love silently, resplendently awaits. Reminds us. Forgiveness crumbles the strongest of wounds.
We'll need to take a moment to let the background noise pass.
Sorry, going downhill.
Okay. So Val, I think I can see what you wrote. I actually couldn't hear every word. There were a little bit of just your audio quality did drop a couple of places, but I did read it all. I wanted to just check in with everybody. Was everybody able to follow along with reading?
Not the whole thing, but it sounded pretty cool. If Valerie, if you could read that again, that would be pretty cool.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, it sounded like a cool poem.
And this time I'll interrupt if your voice goes jarbly, so we can make sure Thomas hears you good.
Okay. Can anybody see the image?
No.
No?
Apparently
Okay.
not.
Okay, well look at my profile picture later on Skype. So consciousness evolves. Wise men and women expand ability. Joy is available. Judgment, used by mind, defends self-righteousness and creates conflict. Aware, we notice that the journey of our lives is an opportunity. Opening to that flow touches the hearts of men, women, the earth, the universe, each a unique individual flower. Some just beginning to bud, some in full bloom. Some burst quickly with vibrant hues, spectacular displays, and quickly expire.
Quickly expire.
Quickly expire. Some open partially, wither, and die. Some never seem to open while death slowly grabs hold. At every opportunity, love silently, resplendently awaits. Death reminds us. Forgiveness crumbles the strongest of walls.
Thank you for sharing that. That is that's definitely got some common themes with some of what we covered today as well as last week. Yeah.
Very cool.
Cool. I thought you would enjoy it.
Do you want to comment further, Valerie?
No, it just ties in, like, the person that I stood up to, the judgment thing, and the feeling to how you deal with, how the death of Robin Williams reminded a lot of people, how important that deeper meaning. Death reminds us of the deeper meaning sometimes, especially his death, and just that when we take responsibility, a lot of times what comes with that is forgiveness of others that we've been pissed at, and then it crumbles our own walls as well as theirs, and hopefully for Robin and his family and people in general to understand the importance of that.
Do you understand the importance of the significance that his death has had on?
Forgiveness.
Oh, okay, forgiveness. Yes. All right, got it. Yeah. My thought would be any kind of really harsh crisis can immediately put things into a new context where things that I've been really focused on, I can simply disregard. I say that just doesn't matter. At least for right now, that does not matter. And I've got other priorities and other, urgent matters to attend to. And I can look around at the people in my midst and go, wow, these people, whether they're on, Facebook or my job or my household, these people are the partners of my life. Like, this is where my life happens, is in my interaction with, in some cases, just interactions with people. That's such a big thing, or can be. What's that?
This is where the love is focused in my life, like that.
It could be appreciation, love. I mean, Thomas was talking about kind of one side of emotions as far as fear, and a lot of times people will say something like, there's a whole family of emotions, all of which boil down to love. So, yeah. Appreciation, though, really, for me, is the first thing. Like, because if we have, I'm going to just use that term, because if we have a sense of how fragile something can be, whether it was lost or not, one of my statements I'll make is, if I have a 6 inches away from a head-on collision 45 miles an hour into another 45 miles an hour, and I'm 6 inches away from that happening, but we miss, I'm probably going to be really aware of the importance of being attentive to driving, especially if I was nodding off or something,
Exactly, and I also agree with these relationships and the forgiveness. Key, I would say, is self-forgiveness, because people we carry with us so much, and so we forgive ourselves, and we forgive others, and we interact or relate to one another in a way that says, hey, I understand that these relations are part of the entire, each relation is almost like a component of humanity. And so for humanity, the nature of humanity to change, I would say be more benevolent, requires that we in the small interact with one another with more benevolence, more humbleness, and forgiveness. Thus, this, as I see it, is the only way for us to change as a civilization, as humanity. So I agree with that. The forgiveness aspects and the relationships that we, each one of us, interact in with one another are actually the key to who we are. And who we are in the small, each one of us, is going to determine who we are as all of humanity.
That was lovely.
That's my comment.
That's lovely.
Did you hear what Valerie said, Thomas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Valerie. It's cool that your poem has so much in there that I've really considered quite often over the years. And I would say it's cool to hear it coming from you and others, because I've seen in the world a kind of awakening of people starting to realize, including myself, that these are keys for us to change humanity, change how we interact with each other. Everyone says, so many people say, oh, we can't change, that's our nature. Well, that's just it. The changing the nature of humanity requires that each of us consider our relationships with one another, changing ourselves so that our relationships are relationships that kind of like that giving and receiving, as doing unto others as we would have others do unto us. It's kind of simple. Those relationships in the small are what's going to change the big of us all. Yeah.
I have to sign up. I have to get my son to bed. It's like after 9, and he promised he'd go get off the computer, and he's still on there. I can hear him with his pen.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us and sharing your poem. Anybody else want to say anything to Valerie before she concludes?
Thank you, Valerie. That was
Thank
great.
you, Valerie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Bye, Valerie.
Bye.
I'm going to sign off too because I've got to get ready for work. I just want to note that the picture that I put on the Facebook, those are of different students that I'm teaching. Those are freshman students, so it was really fun. I just finished teaching their summer school program at the university. But I'm going to sign off also to finish preparing for our lesson tonight and incorporate some of what we talked about, basically. I'm going to add something. So thank you very much, everyone.
You're welcome. All right.
Thanks, Thomas. Good talking to you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, we have an unusual circumstance where we are not at home and we are at someone else's house a couple hours from home, and we would like to get back on the road. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I just remembered we had it, so I'm going to stop that.